first of all, I think I want to separate out the concept of male and female from masculine and feminine. There's a masculine energy or a masculine way of being, and there's a feminine energy or way of being. And all of us have both within us. We all have some degree of masculine and feminine. It's just that we're dominant one way or the other. There are some who are, very balanced. There are some who are, quite strong one way or the other. And then there's some who, there are many women who are very comfortable in masculine energy. And there are many men who are very comfortable in feminine energy. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? And that's what's interesting is with Polynesian culture, they've had no problem with that. Very tribal culture. You have, very masculine men who are also very emotional. You also have, they've had, since the start, trans has not been a problem at all in Polynesian culture. It's been accepted, right alongside, right alongside heterosexual and so forth,
Yeah. I find it's the puritanical culture that came along that branded those things right or wrong.
Oh, it goes way back for Puritanism. Way, way, way up. I mean, this is patriarchy, right? Well, to some degree, actually, that's not entirely true. I think you're right in that Puritanism or maybe Protestantism, before Puritanism, I can tell you exactly when the shift happened. It was like around the time of, there was a church father called Augustine, who before he became a Christian was, a playboy and hedonist. So he became a Christian and he basically hated that previous part of his life and hated anything to do with sex. And so he started preaching that sex was a necessary evil that should only be used for procreation. And so for like hundreds of years that was taught in the church, that very limited perspective, and that it was something shameful. And then with that, everything that was then divergent to heterosexual, not just lovemaking, heterosexual procreation was deemed a sin. So, they talk about the sex police. There was, this just as a funny anecdote, there was one position that was the approved position for having children called the missionary position of all things. And you were only allowed to sleep with your wife on certain days of the week. You couldn't do it too often. You only had to do it in the approved position. So the Catholic Church literally instituted sex police that would go around and spy on people to see if they were breaking the rules. And that was the status quo in our Western world and the view of sexuality for a long time. And the ancient view, even in Abrahamic religions, the ancient view on sexuality was vastly different. It was not shame-based. And I'm of the opinion from my own studies that actually the trans and gay men, and I mean, any form of LGBT would have been fully accepted in the Hebraic times. You've just misinterpreted, and in many cases blatantly misinterpreted a lot of these passages into things that they weren't trying to say. And that's probably a much deeper topic than I have time to go into here.
Sure, yeah. But let's go back to the masculine, feminine energies, because I think that's the track to follow.
So we come back to Polynesia and how they're much more fluid in terms of how they view masculinity and femininity, because in the West, we tended to cast those as roles, right? The masculine role, the breadwinner, the husband, the feminine role, the wife, the mother. They were roles within society that you had to fulfill. And those roles were very constricting because it was captured, it was packaged up as a sort of responsibility you had to carry in society, regardless of how you felt on the inside. And the masculine and feminine energy are divine principles that exist all throughout our planet, and we see it everywhere. And when you understand those principles, you can take the heart of it without necessarily having to fashion that into a strict regimented role to say, well, this is exactly what it looks like. Does that make sense? It's like, it's like taking the value, but being flexible in the practice. So the masculine principle is will and intention. There's a verse in the Bible that says is the will of the Father. So the masculine is about intentionality. So that tends to look like vision, purpose, determination. But that's only one part of the story, because the other side of that story that you need is the feminine, which is motion, energy and motion, some people say. But that's the receptive part of the will that nurtures will into life.
Is the emotion.
It's the emotion, the energy, the life-giving, right? It responds. The feminine principle responds to the masculine principle. You see this in the creation story in the Bible. You see this in just the dynamic of how things function between people on Earth.
How is it in the creation story?
So when you have, in the creation story, right, you have the Father speaking as the voice, right? The Father says, let there be light, right? So it describes the setting to begin with. The Father is the unseen, is the voice. The voice speaks about will and attention. What you have then is it talks about this planet, and it talks about the spirit hovering over the waters of the planet. That's the feminine. So when the Father speaks, let there be light, speaks intention, the spirit responds. It's like the sound waves of the light activate the spirit to produce and create. And it's actually the feminine force that does the creative work, right?
It's the response. I've never considered it that way. Let there be light, and the response, let there be light as the masculine, and the response of the creation as the feminine, or the energy and motion. The energy and motion.
Energy and motion. So we tend to think in Western cultures, men being very powerful and women being very sort of weak and vulnerable, but actually it's not the case. Women move in a very powerful spiritual energy. And they often flow in that energy more easily than men do. But when you take them, put them in a world that's divorced of spiritual energy, now they're vulnerable because they're cut off from their true power. And we do that because we're afraid of it. That's what, a lot of religious cultures have done. We're afraid of that feminine energy, so we're going to subdue it. We're going to hide it. We're going to control it. We're going to overpower it. We're afraid of spirit, divine.
What is the harmonious way to work with the feminine energy in regards to community?
So, it changes the whole fundamental basis of how we relate to begin with. So let's talk about male and female relationships first, right? Because that's the starting point. So, ego-based love in the West is based on a power dynamic, between the man and the woman, and it comes from this idea of you're looking for this person who's going to complete you. So you're approaching the relationship already from a place of being incomplete, scarcity, incomplete. I'm incomplete and I need somebody to make me complete. So I'm looking for that person who's going to fulfill me. And so that creates the power dynamic, because the ego need of the man is for this control. The ego need of the woman is because she's cut off from her spiritual feminine divine. She feels vulnerable, so she wants protection, right? And so most ego-based relationships are not actually true unconditional love. We speak about, this is true love, it's unconditional love. It's not. Most of them are based on they're transactional. They're based on a trade-off. Okay, I will give you protection if you submit to me and become my wife, and the other person says, okay, I will give you love and affection if you give me protection, right? And so then you go into this relationship because you're looking for that person who completes you. You go into this relationship not seeing who that person is, you're seeing the projection of that person you've placed on that person, of who you need that person to be.
Not only in romantic relationships. I think those projections happen in all of our relations in many ways.
Yes, correct. We do that with everyone, especially if our relationships are transactional. We do that with people. And then we put this projection that's based on our expectations about, this is who I need you to be. So the moment you aren't that person, the moment that the projection slips and you're not that person, then I feel let down. I feel disappointed, I feel angry. I had this expectation of you. You were going to be this person for me, or you were going to do this for me, or whatever, right? And so that enforces the ego-based relationship. So I'd say to people, when you're looking for a partner, look for the person that complements you, not the person that completes you. Don't bring your unwholeness to the relationship. Find your wholeness first within as a spiritual being, and then find the person that complements you in some way that you can share your journey with. But don't go in placing expectations on this person that they're going to be all of these things for you, because that's where all the fighting and the arguments stem from, is missed expectations. So when you start with that as the root of relationships, that all our relationships, as you've said, are just projecting onto people what we need them to be. Now imagine trying to build a community out of that. Right?
Yeah. Yes.
Constant disappointments and warfare, right? Rather than true acceptance.
Even in brotherhood, I just gotta say, Josh, like, you're touching on some really powerful things here, because even in brotherhood, men project onto sacred sons, men project onto, people who are ahead of them, or people who are leading them on weekends even. In the men's work, there's all kinds of dad projections, or you're the guy who hurt me type of projections. And we get to meet those in a really healthy way. I think some of the work we're doing is undoing those projections between men so that we can truly see each other as brothers once again. The ironic thing about it doesn't take long. Usually in a weekend, we're hitting that cruising altitude about 6 hours into the experience. We've dropped a few of those projections. We're really getting honest with each other. And we call brotherhood the medicine, because it really is an enlivening type of experience. It gives life to remove those projections and to say, like, hey, brother, I see you. And beyond that, like, I relate to you. I feel you for who you really are, not because I don't need any. And in brotherhood, in these ways that we work, we don't typically need anything from one another necessarily.
And imagine where community where men don't have to put up a facade of masculinity, and women don't have to put up a facade of femininity. I'm a woman. I don't have to pretend to be all vulnerable and needy, to attract a man. I can be powerful and confident in who I am, but still fully feminine.